Welcome Rajiv, Karan, and Pranav,
Thank you.
and thank you so much for sparing time for this discussion. Let me share with the viewers at least that Rajiv, Karan, and Pranav are partners, and they run a company called Quantum Leap. Today, Rajiv and Karan are Asia's leading business coach, and millions of entrepreneurs follow them blindly. Rajiv is also the author of bestseller Lead or Bleed, and Karan is also an author of a book called Cattle or Catalyst. And I can guarantee you that if you are an entrepreneur, regardless of scale, if you listen to them once, you will get addicted to them, and you will listen to them every time. Ashwini ji is my partner and investor. He is a reason for whatever we have achieved till date. He is a man who trusted me with his money and resources at the time when I was absolutely zero. And I'm sure at that time, even my own father would not have trusted me with whatever I want to do with money and resources at that time. And this is a very magical moment for me because all the four people who have impacted my life deeply are sharing screen under one frame. So, and let me also share with everyone that my life has changed the day I heard the monkey story from Rajiv during one of their signature business space program, which I attended, and I actually cried that day. That how I wasted my precious year of my life by only working hard and without any clarity. So that is what is the introduction of this all discussion and who all are there in this frame right now. And we have a lot to extract from these people. So I'll shoot my first question, Rajiv.
Well, our journey started in 2006, 2007, which where the simple thought process was that how can we help create workplaces which are focused, which are fun, which are fair. That was the thought process. How can we enable creation of such workplaces? So we started initially as a corporate training company, and we worked with large corporate organizations, and simultaneously we used to work with a lot of MSME businesses where we used to create what we called breakthrough projects back then, where we would get into the business, set a goal, and then train them, coach them, do whatever it takes to help them go through that finish line. So that's how the journey of Quantum Leap actually began. But it was in the year 2016 where we launched our signature business space program, and that's where we met as well, Deepak. And the intention behind the business space program was to give entrepreneurs a step-by-step system so that they can set goals, track goals, achieve goals in every aspect of their business and get out of the usual firefighting. See, firefighting is a word that most entrepreneurs have accepted as a way of life. They think this is the way business is supposed to be done. So for Karan, Pranav, and me, three of us, when we got together, the question was, what is the biggest problem we can solve for entrepreneurs? And the biggest and the most evident problem was this aspect of firefighting, where there was no clarity. People were working hard without any direction and playing the game for monthly survival. So we launched the business space program. Entrepreneurs started reaching out to us saying, hey, we want you to handhold us in implementing this system. Beyond a point, the system grew beyond me, Karan, and Pranav, and we started building a team of coaches, and the rest is history. So far, we worked with 700 businesses through one-to-one consulting for a minimum period of a year to 18 months, 2 years, and now we're taking up projects with entrepreneurs for 3 years. And I would say that the journey is still getting started according to us, because we are evolving on the go, and the more we work with entrepreneurs, the more we realize there's so much more to do with entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. So that's like a quick summary snapshot of how this journey began and how Quantum Leap is what it is today.
Since I have heard your complete story in the program, on how you broke up at one time and then you made it to this, and then how you invested in yourself, and then you made it to this thing. Why I wanted to share with this viewer, because I firmly believe that I think transformation is the biggest proof of wisdom in action.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest USP of all of you, I think, is that you see that that transformation happening within the team, right? It's not only about okay what you teach, whether you're preaching or not. So I think that is what inspired me personally about your story, which I wanted to share with the viewers.
If I have to give people a snapshot, is that I think Karan, Pranav and me are entrepreneurs before we are consultants or coaches. As entrepreneurs, we had a consistent track record of setting goals and not achieving them for a decade. And I always say this to entrepreneurs, that when you're hardworking, when people appreciate the quality of your work and you're still not making money, that's a very painful reality to live every single day. See, if you're lazy, if you're not bothered about achieving goals, you're distracted in your life and you're not achieving anything, it doesn't hurt you because you don't expect that out of yourself. But in our case, what used to happen is for the first 10 years, every client we worked with used to say, you're the best that we worked with. Your guys are amazing. We were great trainers. We were great coaches. We were pathetic entrepreneurs ourselves. And in the year 2014, we made a decision that one of us has to step out of the day-to-day of the business and go on a learning journey, go on a research journey. And that's when I stepped out and we went on this journey to interview 300 business leaders from across India. People like Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who's built Biocon. People like Ashok Soota, who's built Happiest Minds Technologies. People like CK Kumaravel, who's built Natural Salon. So we interviewed entrepreneurs who had built successful, scalable businesses from scratch, just to understand two things. What's the psychology of building a scalable business? And what are the systems and strategies to build a scalable business? Now, this entire research journey took a good 16 months. And that's when Karan and Pranav were holding fort in the business, while I was like a nomad wandering across the country and interviewing people. And then I brought back whatever research I could do. And together, the three of us created this system called PACE system. And we first started applying it in our own business. And we started seeing that there was a different level of clarity, a different level of capability that we could bring to the table as entrepreneurs. I published a book titled Lead or Bleed in Feb 2016. The book went on to become a bestseller, way beyond what we'd expected. So we'd be liars if we sat here and said we knew that we were on to something that was magical. The magic unfolded. The book went on to be a bestseller. A lot of entrepreneurs reached out to us saying, hey, I'd love for you to help us implement this system within our organization. And that's how the entire consulting business grew to 6 countries today with 700 plus entrepreneurs who we are working with.
Fantastic. I think I love every part of it because you feel very connected. Like we all go through all this journey, right? And somebody coming out of that, and then he's trying to teach you something. I think it is more acceptable to the entire community, I believe. My next question is to you, Karan. You all three are almost same age group, and I think almost have similar background, that is coaching. And it is natural to have disagreement on various decisions, like which you take collectively.
I don't think it's a secret tip, to be honest. I think it's the foundation to any successful relationship. It's the same principles which apply between the three of us. You're very right when you said, Deepak, that that we do have our disagreements. There's no two ways about it, but we're very different people. I think that's our biggest strength. Usually when we look at a partnership, people look for similar people. In our case, because we are completely different, our personalities are different, our likes, our interests are completely different. We as people, I mean, our world itself, the way we look at it is different. But at the end of the day, we look at a common world, and and that equation being created is actually what is our biggest strength. I think when we have our disagreements, what I would say principles we follow to make sure that we come to conclusions is that no matter what, we don't hesitate to ensure that everybody's opinion is heard. So everybody expresses themselves completely. Secondly, we don't shy away from sharing our opinions on other people's opinions. So if Rajiv has an opinion and I have a disagreement, I won't keep quiet. I will share what I really feel about it, and vice versa. Similarly, if Pranav has something different compared to what I have to say, he will never shy away. And I think that's that level of trust and transparency which we have creates the foundation of a relationship. And thirdly, when that happens, I think the biggest freedom we give to each other is to hold each other accountable without any residual effect. Like, I know for a fact if Rajiv were to hold me accountable, he's holding me accountable for the situation at hand and not because it's something personal. That distinction is very, very clear, which makes it so much easier to work. And no matter what disagreements we have that common agreement that we will come to some sort of a conclusion. And I think that's honestly been the, I wouldn't say the secret, but the recipe of our partnership so far. Yeah, I think that pretty much summarizes it.
And who has the final say then?
So the thing is, the beauty about the three of us is that our say has always been final together. We've never had a situation where it's 2 against 1 or 1 against 2. Or it's because we all jump in together or we don't do it at all. Because I personally don't believe in this philosophy that if one person is completely against it, then we should go forward, because that feeling is there. We're not in it together. At the end of the day, it's all or nothing. And I mean, the good part is that we have that chemistry and the relationship between us that no matter what, it's together, whatever the situation we face. So it's all.
And I feel it's also to do with, we understand each other's strengths.
Yep.
So if it is a point of discussion, to do with what is up Karan's strengths, then Pranav and I have that trust that we are going to let him lead the way in that area. Same thing when it's a point of discussion which falls under Pranav's expertise, we have that trust that we're going to let him lead the way. So I think that chemistry is what Karan said, that we let each other take charge.
Yeah, another thing to add to it is that I think at no point of time we let any of us feel lesser than one another. Irrespective of what the situation is, we all know what role and what significance each of us play in each of our lives. And this is beyond the company. This is about the three of us. I totally believe that, I mean, the company comes secondary. At the end of the day, if the people who are running it have a good chemistry, that's what defines who the company is. It's a people-oriented business at the end of the day. And that equation between us is so strong that we will not let anybody feel differently. We all need to feel one. And that's, again, the foundation with whatever we do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think you can even add, I think, a scientific framework to build up chemistry like this.
One day, probably.
And if you have to look at it, from a scientific point of view, I think it's two things, Deepak. One is having very, very clear role clarity, which is an alignment with strengths of the three of us, which is what is in our case. And secondly, we always look at what's the objective and which opinion of ours will get us closer to the objective by stating out pros, by stating out cons, and by agreeing that a particular way forward is what will get us to the objective. And say, for example, in a case where I don't completely agree with the point of view from Rajiv, okay, but I trust the facts that he's sharing, I trust the points that he's put forward, and we agree to it, understanding that that's one thing that all of us have to be in agreement with. Right. So there's something called as disagree yet commit. That's what the three of us truly follow.
Fantastic. So I think
you say agree to disagree.
Yeah, agree to disagree.
Yeah. Sorry, agree to disagree. Yeah.
So my next question is to you, Pranav, only that you are the backbone, and I think you are the brain in action behind the Quantum Leap. While mostly, I think we all see Rajiv and Karan are playing in the front. You manage the show from behind the stage.
Just like how Rajiv does what he has to do flawlessly, and just like how Karan does what he has to do flawlessly. Because I don't see it as any different. Whether it is being upfront and being the face of the brand, or whether it is being the backbone and managing everything at the back end to allow the entire organization to do what it is supposed to be done. It again boils down to what's each of our roles. If that's the role that I'm playing, then I have to play that role 100%. which allows Rajiv to play the role that he's playing 100%, and that allows Karan to play the role that he's playing 100%. So each of us understand our roles, understand our strengths and weaknesses, and I think we have been very, very transparent with, at least I've been very transparent with the both of them in what I am not good at, and I know Karan and Rajiv also constantly keep sharing what they are not good at. And between the three of us, we are looking at how can we fill each other, how can we fill the gaps in each other. Do you get what I'm saying? And that's how I think a partnership is developed. And going back to the point that Karan was saying, that's why we enjoy the fact that we are three different people and not similar to each other. Because there are strengths that none of us have in common, there are weaknesses that none of us have in common. So the completion of the three of us is what I think is fun to be with. And I think that is the primary reason why we've been able to come this far. It's not like we've achieved major greatness. There's a very, very, very long way to go. But for us to be able to come this far, I think that's the primary reason, that we have different strengths, different weaknesses, understand each of our roles, and play our roles to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely. Bang on. Rajiv, this question is for you. I think you have been giving clarity to entrepreneurs on almost everything. I think you've been, bombarded with a lot of questions at the various forums and all that thing.
Good one, coming at a good timing, especially after the pandemic. Okay. I would say, see, there's always a next level, right? I would say for us, what we've been able to accomplish, though we are a 14-year-old company, I feel our rebirth happened in 2016. And what we created from 2016 to 2020 was path-breaking, not just for us, but for pretty much the entire business coaching industry in India. And with the pandemic, what happened was we didn't take 2 steps back, but the world took 10 steps forward. What do I mean by that? The penetration of clutter in the training and coaching industry really went through the roof. And this I say with utmost and due respect to all the new aspiring trainers that the market is seeing on social media. I say this with utmost respect to each one of them, but the challenge that came in for us was it felt like what we built over the last 4 years, now we have to play the same game. Like we have to promote webinars, promote online events, and we've never been online. We've always focused on offline live events. We've always believed in human connection more than digital connection. So from that point of view, it was a very interesting phase where we had to differentiate ourselves, almost as though we had to start a new game. It's like the game we played for 4 years, that game got over and suddenly there was a new game. And I think that was the exciting part. I would be lying if it was not emotionally challenging at times. So it was exciting as well as emotionally challenging. We've been able to conquer that beautifully from July to now. The experience we've been able to create. I think this challenge became our biggest blessing. In the past, across India at least, we would just go to 5 cities: Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad. From July to now, we've had clients from more than 60, 70 cities in every single program of ours. Our coaching community is expanding. So in that way, the challenge turned out to be a blessing. But if you ask me, what is that area that still we lack clarity on, which is a question for us to answer, is how do we take our PACE system across the world to the entire MSME space. Our vision is that how companies say that they have done Six Sigma or they follow lean management or all these other global management systems. We truly believe PACE has the potential to be that. Our entrepreneurs who attended it, implemented it, have told us that. So our next level is right now being spent in answering the question, how do we make PACE system a way of working in organizations across the world? So that is an I don't know, but I'm excited about challenge in our life at this point of time.
I'm sure you will figure it out.
Yes.
So my next question is to you, Karan. Karan, you are the biggest advocate of process over people. In fact, I love your quote that process work, people don't. However, you still need people and their soul to get anything executed.
Okay, so Deepak, is it okay if I change your statement a little bit? Okay. First of all, I'm not an advocate of process over people. I'm a hardcore people guy. I think processes and systems are useless if there's no people. And the quote I say is that it's not processes, it's systems, because processes are designed for the output. They're two different words. And especially when you talk to someone like me, the minute those words are used out of context, for me, there's one, batti which starts getting.
So just for the viewers, Karan's the mad scientist.
Yeah, you could.
He's the devil of the detail. He likes things to be perfectly perfect. Pranav and me are the most shabbier guys. So that's why you see he will technically correct the definition first. Go ahead, Karan.
But more than beyond that, I'll tell you the main correction I wanted to make was that it's not process over people for me. It's always people over process, systems, anything else. And I'm saying this out of experience because in our organization also, the only person who's actually been leading teams from the very beginning has been me, and I still continue to do that. And I think that's my biggest strength, working with people. What I've come to believe is that I feel systems work, people don't, because if you don't have systems in your team, in your business, then you don't have a mechanism to manage and measure the activity of people, and everything can be systemized. Like, I believe even culture can be systemized. Even you can have systems even in relationships. Today, most successful relationships are successful because they have certain systems which people follow, which enable them to connect with each other. If not, there's no mechanism to understand are we going on the right track or not. Having said that, people is always the foundation. And my belief is simple. You change the system based on the people, but systems are required. But always people over systems, no matter what.
Fantastic. So I have to make a correction that it's not process. Note it down again. So Pranav, my question is to you. I think like how Rajiv also explained that there's so much of digitalization happening around it, right?
I think right now the entire coaching and training business is going through a churn. What do I mean by that is pre-pandemic, pre-March, the coaching business was moving in a certain direction, with value being appreciated, and the ones who were truly genuinely adding value and were good at what they were doing was being appreciated and valued. But then from March onwards, considering the entry barrier being so low, because you can just put up Facebook ads and then put up a webinar and then become a trainer and a coach. So because of the entry barrier being low, we've seen a lot of people coming into this entire business, into this entire industry. And over the last 6 to 8 months, there's a lot of churn that is happening, right? The good ones are here to stay, and they're here to stay for good, and they deserve to stay for good, right? But the ones who are trying it primarily because it was an opportunity, because the pandemic was giving them that opportunity, and people are also hooked on to webinars, I think they will slowly wither out. But the good ones will stay here for good. And going forward in the future, it's the ones who've been consistently been able to add value and are authentic in their information and knowledge, and are authentic in providing their participants an experience that can add value to their lives rather than just sounding good. I think one of the problems with our industry is there are too many people who sound good, right? So we need, but obviously the customer is a lot more smarter. The customer knows what he is absorbing, what he's getting into, and with some time, and when I say some time, I'm talking about a few months, the customers will be very, very clear about who are the people that they'd like to follow, learn from, and implement, and who are the people who just sound good. Like, great marketing doesn't necessarily always make you a great coach or a great trainer. So I think that will happen over a period of the next 5 to 6 months is what I believe. And then going forward, it will be a good combination of online and offline, where your customers will learn both in an online environment and an offline environment, because I strongly believe that there's no substitute to the offline learning environment, because that's a different ballgame altogether. That will continue to happen, but at the same time, with the new way of working that has come into the world right now, this also will continue to be there and play its own part. So each of them will have their own parts to play, and the truly good ones will shine. Yeah, that's my belief.
Absolutely. Makes sense. With this now, I will hand over to Ashwini ji for grilling you more. And he is also writing a book now, for which we have yet to freeze on the title, but we are almost freeze on the subtitle, that is what to expect and how to extract ROI on your investment or technology. So title we have to get to freeze on that. But since Ashwini ji has a background of technology and he's been into IT from almost now 3 decades, he's writing a book on that. So I'll hand over to Ashwini ji to ask you more questions.
Yeah, welcome to all of you again. I will not repeat the introductions which Deepak has already made about all of you. It will be wastage of time, mostly your time. Our time is in any case there to grill you all. Straight come to the point that when we talk of investment technology,
My personal view on not just technology, I feel just the entire verbatim of how organizations are structured, I see a flaw in it. You go to a HR conference and you will see HR leaders complaining about how the rest of the business is discarding them as a support function and not as a core business function. You go to a CFO conference and you will see the CFOs complaining about how the rest of the business is treating them like bookkeepers and clerks and not looking at them as a strategic business function. You go to a CIO conference, you will see technical heads talking about how they are being discarded by the rest as a support activity and not the core business activity. And my true belief is, unless and until there is no integration, which means what? If you don't have a HR who's played an operational or a sales or marketing role, his sensitivity to the business will be very, very minimal, and he'll go more by the book with the theories of HR, and he will never be able to add strategic value to the business as a HR business partner. Same holds with technology heads. If a technology head does not have sensitivity to the various other aspects of business, the core functions of the business, of why the technology is getting created, or to the aspects of people management and things like that, their ability to communicate, create, and add value will be very, very minimal. So I would say organizations that understand this principle of diversity of experience and then delegation of leadership and responsibility will always make better quality of decisions than organizations that go by background and educational qualifications of people saying, okay, he's from XLRI Jamshedpur, he should be a HR head of our company, and that guy's from IIT Kharagpur, so he should be the CIO of our company. If that monotonous approach is there in any function, not just technology, I feel those organizations take more cycles of reiterations, mistakes, failed projects, and then say we learn from our mistakes and then adapt. I think you got to get people to get their hands dirty across all businesses, across all business functions, before you give them complete leadership roles of one particular function. That's like a personal view.
but is it fair, Rajiv, to expect a HR guy or let's say operations guy to handle finance, or vice versa, or whichever way it is?
So it's like this. Who defines the scope of fairness? The scope of fairness is defined by what we've been used to seeing traditionally. If you do what is traditional, you just get traditional outcomes. But look at businesses where you've had leaders who've been path breaking. If you look at, let's just say, the space of human resources, and if you see leaders that inspire in that space, you will see a pattern of diversity in their background, because diversity makes you more appreciative of the needs of different stakeholders, and it makes you more competent to handle the needs of different stakeholders. So I would say yes, by the book. Traditionally, if an organization puts this need saying get your hands dirty across different functions, the traditional career path of most people will be like, no, this is not for me, I'm not supposed to do this. That's where intrapreneurship comes in, right? That's when you need leaders in large organizations who are playing the role of an entrepreneur even though they don't own the business. And those are the ones who fast track in their careers. Those are the ones who produce the results for the organization. The rest can go by the book and then wonder why my career is becoming over a period of time, it's becoming irrelevant in the organization. So I would say that it's a game of getting your hands dirty.
Really agree with you, Karan. I think Deepak, we need to relook at this again in terms of his answers. Yeah. Let's go to Karan now. Karan, you have been working closely with thousands of entrepreneurs in your journey.
Uh, 100%. I see a gap, and I'll tell you why. I think if you look at, especially with the kind of entrepreneurs we work with, there's very minimal understanding about what technology is and what technology can do. And that's honestly because of lack of knowledge and lack of awareness. I think when the exposure increases, and I think exposure increases when their business grows to that level and capacity where technology integration is required. But there is a lack of understanding. People, I believe, especially at the management level, when technology needs to be invested, obviously it's not like there's an overnight return. It takes some time for technology to be implemented, for people to understand, more than anything else, for people to understand how to use it and how to use it to get the kind of returns and analytics they want, like the whole purpose of it. That takes time. And you're right, I think people lack that understanding about how much time it takes. I think technology is an investment. There's no two ways about it. And like any investment, there is a return, and the return comes over a period of time. But I also think a lot of entrepreneurs make mistakes because of this lack of awareness in investing in technology. Like, for example, they just get carried away with the word technology and actually use the wrong technology because they're not educated. Yeah. And therefore, when they don't get the returns they expect, they get hassled, they get upset because the decision of investing in the technology itself was wrong. So I think it goes down to awareness and knowledge, where the gap needs to be reduced to understand what's the right technology required, keeping in mind the level of business a person's playing at that point of time. What exactly is the return expected? Like, what are you expecting the technology to do? Because people have a lot of fancy, crazy ideas about what technology can do versus actually what it can do. Because there's a limitation to automation. At the end of the day, when you're automating something, it just replaces certain human intervention to give you more information. But technology can't make decisions. You have to make decisions at the end of the day, right? And people don't get that. So I think that's the second step, for people to get aware of what can they expect. And third, to be very clear about what is the turnaround time required for the return on investment to come in, so that they know that they're reaping the benefits of this. I think this educational gap needs to be plugged. And when that is plugged, I think people will make better decisions when it comes to technology. I think it should be the business owner itself, because how many of consultants you bring on board, or how many of people whom you hire, at the end of the day, technology has to be aligned with the management and the vision of the organization. And I'll probably add a perspective to the question you asked Rajiv also. You asked a question to Rajiv saying who should make the decision. I don't think it should be, if there's a technology which is invested for the better management of the organization, it can't be the CFO, it can't be the CEO, it can't be the HR. It needs to be the entire top management, because the entire company is going to be impacted by that technology. The execution can happen by the person who's an expert in handling it. Say, for example, as a CTO, the CTO can probably handle the execution, but whether the technology is required or not, I think the entire top management team has to take a call, and then someone else has to execute it. With that being said, to answer the question which you're asking right now, I think it's the business owner or the management who needs to make the decision about getting themselves more educated about it, so they know what they're getting into. It's like any investment. Yeah, so I believe it's a collective decision. I believe the doing is different, the decision making is different. So it's a very comprehensive approach.
Okay, thanks, Karan. In fact, my next question was to Pranav, but I think Karan has already answered this. I'll not repeat that question again. Okay, so I go back to Rajiv. See, you have been making statements about your and life approach.
Yep. So let me tell you, most people, when they think of life, balancing life, they think it's 8 hours of work, 8 hours of family, 8 hours of sleep, and that's your life balance. Your life will never ever achieve that 8 plus 8 plus 8 24-hour magical formula. Balance is not a function of time. Balance is a function of clarity. The challenge is most people lack clarity. What do I mean by clarity? Simplest thing, most people do not have clarity of what is their goal in their health, what is their goal in their wealth creation, what is their goal in their business, and they confuse business and wealth as one thing. Business gives you the income, how you use that income creates your wealth. So most people don't have clarity of health, wealth, relationships, business or career, recreation, contribution, spirituality. And not all of these 7 areas that require you to give time on a daily basis. It's about understanding that, okay, from a recreation point of view, I like to vacation once in 3 months. So am I doing that? From a contribution point of view, I like to set some contribution goals, some causes. Am I clear what are those causes that I'm going to be contributing to? From a spiritual and personal growth point of view, am I clear about what are the things I'd like to learn or experience or explore? And so I think balance goes out of the window, or life becomes imbalanced when people lack clarity in these 7 areas. And even to have clarity that, hey, for the next 6 months, recreation is not a priority for me. Even knowing that something is not a priority for you is clarity, because then you're not going back home and you're not feeling incomplete saying, shit, yaar, I have not taken my kids anywhere. You're not in that thought process when you have clarity. So I think clarity is the first step that creates balance. And the second step is, I love what Karan says, systems. You can have systems in every single area of your life. And when you are able to create those systems for taking care of your health, it could be simple practices that you're following on a daily basis. It could be your exercise routine. It is how much sleep you get, how much water you drink, what kind of food you put into your body. When you have those kind of systems, you are just honoring every single area of your life. What I disagree to strongly is that a lot of people use their work as an excuse to not take responsibility for all the areas of their life. And somewhere, especially within entrepreneurs, there's a sense of pride when you're so involved in your work and you're ignoring everything else. I actually feel deep down inside there is a sense of escapism. People don't want to take responsibility for their relationship. They don't want to take responsibility for their health. So they say, my business is my passion. And what people forget is your business is a part of your life. It's not your life. That's the school of thought I come from. Am I saying that's the only or the right school of thought? No. But I know a lot of entrepreneurs resonate with this school of thought, because for the longest time, they make to be feel guilty by all the entrepreneur interviews they watch or movies they watch or videos they watch saying, see, this guy gave up everything for his business. You're not giving up everything. I'm like, no, I am the sort of entrepreneur who distinguishes business is a part of my life. It's not my life. And therefore clarity and pursuing those goals is what is living an and life. It's never perfect, but it's the pursuit. That's the key.
Perfect, Rajiv. Pranav, last question for you.
2027, that's 7 years from now. And what's the perspective of what perspective of where do I see it? You're talking about what do we do? How big are we?
What Quantum Leap would be in 2027? Be it in terms of reach, be in terms of coaches, be in terms of turnover, everything. Just a small statement.
Okay, so that's a fairly simple answer, because we've been constantly discussing about what our next 5 to 10 years is going to look like. And we've been discussing that for the last 2 to 3 months amongst our second line team of leaders. So what we're doing now is we're working with small and medium business owners, predominantly based out of India. And what we want to see ourselves do in 2027 is to increase the scale of our impact. So 2 things, increase the scale of our impact and increase the depth of our impact.
By what percentage, the scale of impact?
Okay, so we have a crazy number that we are gunning towards. So there's one thing about Quantum Leap, and that is the philosophy of us. The philosophy is working where we believe in a win-win-win system where the entrepreneur values himself, values his team, and values his clients. So the philosophy that we instill when we work with entrepreneurs and other businesses is a certain way of working, which has a direct impact on their lives and their families' lives. So between the three of us, and thankfully we have a fairly large team which is backing us on this, our entire second line team of leaders, we have a mission to be able to impact 3 billion people across the world who follows and lives this philosophy, to live a high performance life, to live a life of clarity, and to live a life of inclusiveness of work, family, and all the other stakeholders in their lives. So if you're looking at scale of impact, 3 billion people is what is the kind of impact that we're looking at. And not necessarily 3 billion business owners.
I understand.
3 billion people impacted by the kind of work that we do with businesses and business owners.
As a ripple effect of what we do. That is an important aspect.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Pranav. Thanks, Pranav, for this answer. I won't take more time. Must say thanks to all of you. And one only takeaway which I can straight away I can see from last 45 minutes is that I am a firm believer of that age is no barrier to learn, and today I've learned that. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad.